Almost everyone in the world has heard of Curtis James Jackson III, also known by his rap name, 50 Cent. But before he was known all over the world for his accolades in the world of hip-hop, for surviving a vicious attack in which he was shot 9 times in the face, neck, arms, hands, and legs, there was a legendary hustler who went by the same name and served as the inspiration for Curtis Jackson's rap name after his passing. Kevin Darnell Martin, also known as the original 50 Cent, was a notorious criminal hailing from Fort Greene, Brooklyn, New York, earning his nickname due to his reputation for shaking down anyone he wanted on the streets, even if they only had a few cents on them. Unlike many criminals from back then, 50 Cent refused to become a dealer, opting instead to make his living off armed robberies, which contributed to his rap as one of Brooklyn's most feared stick-up kids in the 70s and 80s. Fearless by nature, 50 earned a reputation for walking instead of running away from his robberies, allegedly never using a getaway vehicle to escape the scene of his crimes, and never concealing his identity while carrying them out. As a teenager, he started a collective of stick-up kids called the Brooklyn Zoo, and with them, he targeted everyone from pimps to dealers to local store owners to big names in the hip-hop industry, including a young LL Cool J and Jam Master Jay from Run DMC. Although these exploits cemented his standing as a ruthless thug, they also made him a lot of enemies throughout his short but eventful life. Throughout his criminal career, 50 Cent was stabbed numerous times in different incidents and allegedly shot close to 25 times in 9 separate incidents. With that kind of heat on him, it's a miracle he survived until 23. Still, not bad for a man whose body count is alleged to have been close to 3 dozen. In 1987, 50 Cent was hit by one of his close associates, who ended up serving about a decade in prison for first-degree manslaughter. After his passing, 50 Cent served as the inspiration for the now famous rapper of the same name's moniker, who even financed his tombstone after his passing as a sign of gratitude and respect for his legacy. Almost 37 years after his passing, the original 50 Cent is still remembered as one of the most ruthless young criminals in the 1970s and 1980s Brooklyn. This is his story. Kelvin Darnell Martin, or Lil Shaft, as he was called by his friends and family in his early childhood days, was born on July 24, 1964, in the South Bronx in New York City. When he was just 8 years old, his parents split, after which his mother allegedly pinned a note on his back, put him on a bus, and sent him to live with his grandmother nearby. A few years later, he moved to the Fort Greene district of Brooklyn, where he was exposed to Islam by way of the Five Percenters, a black nationalist Islamic sect that was founded on the belief that 5% of the African American population was destined to rule the rest of the world. As a teenager, Martin kicked off his criminal career by robbing people on the street, until eventually his crimes landed him a sentence as a juvenile at the infamous Riker Island prison in New York. Upon his release, he is said to have associated himself with the Supreme Team street gang, not to be confused with Kenneth McGriff's Supreme Team from Jamaica, Queens. Known to be armed at all times with a Colt 45 and a .357 Magnum, Martin quickly became known as the guy who could stick up and shake down whoever he pleased, no matter how much money they had on them at the time. Although it was widely accepted that this is the reason he earned the name 50 Cent, other sources report that he got his nickname from an incident where he entered a game of dice with 50 cents and ended up winning more than $500 in a single night. While this would be pretty cool if it were true, there's yet another version of the story that claims his nickname may also be an allusion to his tiny size. As a teen, 50 Cent was only 5'2" and 120 pounds. Early on in his criminal career, 50 Cent rejected the idea of becoming a dealer in the blossoming world of the dope trade, opting instead to cut his teeth on armed burglaries, eventually assembling a team of thieves from Brooklyn called the Brooklyn Zoo, a collective of criminal youth who targeted blue-collar workers, college students, liquor stores, drunk club patrons, dealers, and even pimps. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, the Brooklyn Zoo was known for targeting people at the Empire Skating Rink, the Brooklyn Armory, and the Albee Square Mall. Sometimes, 50 would even go to concerts in New York and New Jersey just to rob other concertgoers. But what really made his reputation grow was when he began sticking up big names in the hip-hop industry, including members of the rap group Houdini and LL Cool J, the latter of whom he once robbed in the parking lot of a White Castle in Brooklyn, where he held him at gunpoint and forced him to hand over his gold chain to give to his daughter. According to locals, he had a similar encounter with Jam Master Jay of Run DMC, a figure who was loved and respected by pretty much everyone else in the country, but apparently not by 50 Cent. After 50 tried to rob Jay, a wild shootout between the Brooklyn Zoo and another youth gang from Jam Master Jay's neighborhood ensued. But even though he was known for robbing up-and-coming rappers, as well as well-established stars in the industry just for the heck of it, he also had some friends who were pretty high up in the rap world, including Eric Barrier of Eric B and Rakim, with whom he became real close friends in the mid-80s, even being featured in a photo that was put on the back of Eric B and Rakim's debut album, Paid in Full. Over time, 50 Cent started getting greedy, and he began cleaning out stash houses belonging to the powerful dealers, often resorting to kidnapping and extorting to walk away with the biggest bag possible. Eventually, Martin started offering protection from robberies to dealers, pimps, and local store owners. If they declined the offer, he would promptly assault them and rob them. One of the things that stood out about 50's crimes is that while most criminals ran away from their robberies, 50 Cent was known to walk away from them, allegedly never stepping foot in the getaway vehicle, no matter how sour his robberies turned. With the money he made from his criminal career, 50 Cent bought all kinds of wild stuff to indulge his expensive taste, including a custom gold-colored Volkswagen Jetta, which he became associated with over the years. But despite all the money he made and the reputation he acquired on the streets as one of Brooklyn's most feared stick-up kids, 50 also suffered the consequences of his crimes. Throughout his short life, 50 Cent was stabbed multiple times on different occasions, and it's estimated that he was shot close to 25 times in 9 separate incidents. Miraculously, even though he never made even the slightest effort to conceal his identity during his burglaries, hits, and kidnappings, Martin was never even arrested for a hit, which is even crazier to think about when you take into account that his body count was allegedly around 3 dozen. In the mid-80s, when the heat of the streets and the wrath of the enemies he had made throughout his life started to rain down on him, Martin realized his life was in danger and decided to enlist in the army. Pretty soon after, he was honorably discharged and sent back to New York from Georgia, where he was serving at the time. Once back in New York, he was booked for burglary charges from a previous incident, but was allowed to walk soon after. He moved into his girlfriend's precious apartment in the Albany House projects in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. Just a couple of months after moving in with this girl, 50 Cent was shot at the Albee Square Mall, after which he started wearing bulletproof vests everywhere he went. On October 20th, 1987, Julio Wemo Acevedo, a member of 50 Cent's crew, rode up to the Albany houses at around 9:30 p.m., going up to the 13th floor apartment to meet 50 Cent, who he felt safe enough around Wemo not to wear his bulletproof vest, which he wore everywhere else and with everyone else. At around 10 p.m., the two men prepared to leave the building and were walking down the stairs when Wemo all of a sudden whipped out his gun and shot 50 on the stairway. A few hours later, 50 Cent was found on the 7th floor landing, suffering from gunshot wounds to the head, chest, and stomach. Sadly, 4 days after the incident, 50 passed away at the Kings County Hospital. And despite all of the wealth he accrued throughout his criminal career, the only thing his family received from him after his passing were his gold teeth. It's been reported that his stash boxes, which were full of stacks of cash, were found completely empty later that evening. Days after his passing, Martin's body was laid to rest in Staten Island in a mass grave with 4 other people. Shortly after the hit, 18-year-old Julio Wemo Acevedo was charged with first-degree manslaughter, but the conviction was soon overturned when Wemo claimed that he was coerced into the hit by some of Martin's enemies who had kidnapped a close family member of Wemo and threatened to hit him if he refused. After a cooperating witness supported Wemo's claim, he was instead incarcerated for first-degree manslaughter, later being sentenced to 8 years in prison. In several interviews after the hit, 50's former associate and friend, Brian Glaze Gibbs, claimed that the real reason for the hit was that in 1986, while Glaze was fighting a hit charge that would put him away for life, he and 50 used to talk on the phone every day. During one of their conversations, 50 allegedly proposed to Glaze a plan to rob one of 50's associates' stash houses for a payout of anywhere between $250K to $500K. Unfortunately, Martin ran his mouth a little too much and told the wrong person about the plot, after which his associates found out about 50 and Glaze's plan to clean him out. Allegedly, 50 then blamed Glaze for the robbery plan, which his associate didn't buy, and ended up putting a bag on his head. After his passing, Martin's life and influence were covered in the in-depth documentary titled The Infamous Times, Volume 1, The Original 50 Cent, starting from his upbringing in the Bronx and Brooklyn and culminating in his gruesome passing at the Albany houses. Although he never found out, his name later served as the inspiration for South Jamaica Queens rapper Curtis James Jackson's stage name, who adopted the moniker as his career started to take off, and the rest is history. Even though 50 Cent was originally laid to rest without a tombstone, the second 50 Cent offered his family some money to pay for it as a sign of respect for the man who inspired his stage name. Today, almost 37 years after his hit, the original 50 Cent is still remembered as one of the most ruthless young criminals and feared stick-up kids in the 1970s and 1980s Brooklyn.